Why Souls games are addictive. If you're watching this video, then you probably are the one who has a love and hate relationship with Dark Souls or Bloodborne or maybe, just maybe, Elden Ring, if you know how to run on horseback. And in this video, I'm going to ask one of my friend who always liked casual game that how he got addicted to Souls-like games. But before analyzing and answering this question, I have another question for you. What is Souls-like? A simple Google search will tell a subgenre of action role-playing games known for high level of difficulty and environmental storytelling, typically in dark fantasy settings. This definition states that any game which is developed by From Software and inspired by From Software games are called Souls-like. Yeah, I'm talking about Dark Souls. Souls-like game from Dark Souls. But before we dive into our analysis, I want you to know that not all games are fun. Of course, what a mastermind I am. But when games are fun and addictive and when not. Games are fun when you have a purpose. You can connect with the main character or when the game is too engaging. For example, Far Cry 5 and 6, I don't fucking know what my personality is. So that's a good example of non-engaging characters in game. But character do not always define the fun factor in game. For example, in Skyrim, we were Dragonborn, who doesn't speak. The only thing he does is But you should know that the main character plays a very important role in defining what purpose do you have in game and are you willing enough to follow the storyline. A good example is Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher and V from Cyberpunk. CD Projekt Red did an amazing job creating these characters with such an polished and detailed character development that provides the immersive experience for games to follow main character's path and choices. At some point in game, you might start liking them. That's the power of the main character. But any Soulsborne game except Sekiro doesn't provide a solid main protagonist. So how did they manage to maintain interest? Now here comes another factor of the game where you can have fun, which is gameplay, depth and environmental puzzle. In the case of Dark Souls, you are too busy solving the environment, finding the right path or a secret hidden item in some hidden wall in the middle of some dark freaking forest. Anyways, these mechanisms provides players a sense of progression where he or she can engage more and more through the environment and gameplay depth, like choosing the right armor set for the right weapon, right ring for left hand. Just kidding. Now, games are no fun when something gets too much repetitive without any sense of progression. Example, combat, story, gameplay loop. It's not like there's no repetition in game. Every game has it, but it consists sense of progression. For example, Dishonored. The more you play, the more repetitive it gets, but every time you engage in combat, you get a wide range of approach and you're not gonna end the fight like you did last time. Or for example, Ghost of Tsushima. The combat in this game gets very repetitive very early in the game, but the butterfly smooth animation and kill effect and the art of combat and the smooth katana thrusts feels so satisfying that you don't get bored easily. Souls-like do exactly that, but in a very large scale. Let me explain. Every Souls-like game has one thing in common: difficulty. But why? Because no matter how good you become, every new area has new enemies and bosses, which has new movesets. So in all games you keep learning and learning and learning and learning and learning and learning, etc. Plus every new area gives you different items, weapon, armor, charms and god knows what not. And all these things create an endless cycle of fun and of course a sense of progression, which creates a very high level of dopamine. Another point of game where players lose interest is got no purpose to chase like a good story or a good side objective. What's special about Dark Souls is there's no minimal flaws in it, which makes it boring. Of course the main character is not relatable, but the story and lore is for everyone. But there's one thing which it did is if if you're willing to dive in the lore, it's almost endless. And the more you engage in combat and try to master it, the game teaches you that you are still not qualified for it. And in the end, if you're really a pro player, but every time you play, it challenges you to do even better. That's the reason speedrun is so popular in Dark Souls game. Cause no matter what you do, you can do better each and every time you approach it. But what if you're not just into it? You just don't want to engage in lore, combat and other RPG elements. You just want to boot up the game and enjoy. Well, it doesn't let you. But at the same time, you can enjoy it without diving into it. Because you're eventually going to... Let me explain. A friend of mine don't play games too often. He just don't like competitive environment in games. And yes, he does play games in most of the easiest difficulty. But I remember when he first stepped into Sekiro, he was so hooked up that he just don't want to give up. Of course, he didn't beat Sekiro, not even the main story, but he played it dozens of hours. And then he played Elden Ring, Dark Souls, etc. Of course, he didn't beat any of it, but he likes Soul games now. He still plays other games on easiest difficulties, but he has a different attitude towards Souls-like games. His mentality changed, there's no going back from him now. So, the conclusion is if you started playing Souls-like games, there is no going back. But this made me think what happened and why. Why a gamer who always plays a game on easiest difficulty has a different attitude towards Souls-like game. And he rages, quits, but still he gets back on it. What's so addictive about it? But don't worry, I'm gonna ask him directly and you're all gonna see what he's about to say. But before, let's analyze the most recent and successful Souls-like game, which is of course Lies of P. Lies of P is a very recent Souls-like game which got popular among gamers. Why? Because it actually did better in many aspects like weapon customization, storytelling, bosses, parry system. So simply it combines all the fun part of each Souls-like game in such a way that Lies of P actually feels so much easy and satisfying when you play it right, and at the same time punishingly hard when you play it casually. And finally, there is a concept of getting better. Remember back in those days of Dark Souls 3, there was a meme which says get better. It actually came from Souls-like games. Okay, so remember when you first booted Dark Souls 1, you played it, killed so many enemies and you thought, yeah, the gameplay is fun. But then you met the Asylum Demon and he changed the perspective about the game. And when you met the tutorial boss and finally stepped into the main area, you realize you're not just ready to survive. And then each and every time you try hard and engage in battle where you already died hundreds of times. Slowly you stop doing the same mistakes you did previously because Dark Souls forces you to not play casual. So now it's time to ask my friend how he got hooked into Souls-like game. Anxiety, victorious, what does that mean? Let me explain. Every time my friend engages into a boss fight, he tastes defeat. So he tries again and again and again. And when he finally defeats the enemy, he gets a specific victorious feeling he doesn't get in real life. I'm not roasting him, but almost everyone are in same condition. So happy person is going to boot up the game and gonna make himself furious in real. Every Souls-like uses this concept, not just with the bosses but with the level design as well. Imagine you are stuck in a very dirty and cursed area, and after struggling hours and hours, you finally leave that dirty filthy place and step into this beautiful looking place, which gives our mind a sense of victory. Well, that's my analysis. If you have something to write, then I love to read it, so do tell me what's your take on this. Why everyone plays Souls-like games? Well, if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and good luck. Bye.